Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the last Tuesday of May. The last Tuesday of every month, I bring to you my podcast. And I have a guest with me today, Larry Moore with National Guardian Life. And we've been having a lot of fun on these podcasts. And maybe that's just me and my little nerdy self in the extended care planning space, but I sure do enjoy talking about solutions around this. And we've kind of really covered a lot of different areas about extended care. And we all know 2020, wow, what a year. 2021 felt like it started off a little bit the same. We just passed kind of an extension of our tax filings. And Larry, I want to thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk
Sure.
about something that maybe we don't normally you don't normally say these words together when you're talking about long-term care planning, but we're going to talk about gifting strategies, which I think it couldn't be more relevant, right? We just passed the tax filing deadline, unless of course you filed an extension. So we had a little bit of a longer time to get things ready this year with all the things that happened last year. And we're going to talk about some gifting strategies. And I don't know if I've really ever had anybody pick up the phone and talk to me about this, but when I start thinking about it, what a great conversation. Not to mention what a wonderful gift. I mean, it's it's actually pretty cool. What are you seeing, taking advantage of tax codes and things that we can do with this? Are you seeing much of that going on, Larry?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think as the thought process around legacy protection takes us beyond life insurance, because what if we don't die first,
Yeah.
and we need care, right? However you're trying to protect your legacy, that's one way to devastate it as well, or certainly significantly impact it. And we look at all the different ways that we can protect a legacy, and protecting ourselves while we're living but need care is becoming a greater and greater area of importance as far as your end-of-life planning goes. And that's where gifting is beginning to come into the LTC space, where we're seeing, say, grandparents, for instance, that are providing an annual gift to their children and maybe even their grandchildren every year. And then, of course, if that's some money that's then spent, I don't know, taking the family to Hawaii or doing something to their house, it doesn't have any legacy component. It's just like, here's some money, go enjoy yourselves. Well, it gives that child or that family some temporary relief, some temporary satisfaction and fun. But what's the purpose of it? Mm-hmm. And the original purpose of it is that, well, I've got a tax problem. If I can gift a certain amount of money to my kids that they can enjoy and lessen my tax burden, that's kind of how the whole idea of gifting came to be. It's I've got a tax problem, and let me help my kids out and also reduce my income, taxable income. So now what we're beginning to see is that, well, maybe we should provide a greater meaning behind the gifting for our family. And that's where gifting in the form of paying premiums on long-term care insurance is becoming a more popular option for those that are in the position to gift. It's interesting because this year you can gift up to $15,000 per person tax-free, which is a huge number. And in many cases, maybe even a bigger number than we need to worry about. But I ran a scenario just for the fun of it, right?
And you and I think so much alike. I did too.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll compare notes here, but
Awesome.
For instance, I just ran something basic. It's for a couple. So just let's say I have a son who's 55 and his wife is 50, and I run a joint concept with NGL. I just picked that one as an example. And in aggregate, this couple would get the equivalent of 9 years of benefits and a pool of money, tax-free money for long-term care, of just shy of $500,000, $492,750. And that would command a 10-pay premium, because a lot of times the gifting, you want to gift while you're alive, maybe do it over 10 years. That gives you a 10-pay premium of $14,178. So you're under the $15,000 limit for one person.
Right.
So
right.
if you're going to gift say your son and your daughter-in-law each 15,000. Well, guess what? You just bought them
Yeah.
long-term care coverage, and then also gave them more money for fun, if you want to look at it that way. But what's really happening here now is that the first generation is helping the second generation either do a better job or have a greater likelihood of potentially passing on a larger estate to their children, if that makes sense. So instead of potentially devastating the next stage in the legacy transfer through the cost of long-term care, now you're protecting that. So now that family is in a better position to pass on a greater legacy to their children. And we're starting to see this in greater and greater numbers, because I think families are starting to think about planning and wealth preservation in more serious ways. And, you know, living out here in the Seattle area, of course, we're surrounded by all big tech, and there's a lot of young, really affluent people. And I'm talking people in their 50s and early 60s who say work for Google or Microsoft, and they realize that they have parents they'll have to protect someday. And if their parents are in good health, we're also seeing them use this gifting, you know, the tax code, use the gifting law as a way to buy insurance for their parents. And when we think about, again, $15,000 per person, you can buy a lot of long-term care insurance for up to 30 grand a year if it's a 10-pay. So I think that's where we, as I kind of wrap the thought up, it's gifting with the purpose of legacy protection in mind, not just solely for the purpose, I've got to reduce my taxable income, I guess I have to give money to my kids, if that makes sense.
I think it makes perfect sense. And I love the fact that you call it gifting with a purpose, right? There's one thing, because I have relatives that do that. They load up their whole family, their immediate family. So, you know, their 2 kids, their spouses, all of their grandkids, and they truck them down to Disney World. You know, they fly everybody, or they put them on a cruise ship. That is all fine. That is a lot of fun. Great memories for the photo album, right? But
Right.
real planning, real planning has a purpose. And that to me speaks very loudly. And I have to tell you, I bought my long-term care insurance policy for that purpose. I didn't buy it because I thought my daughter was going to jump for joy or my husband was going to be ecstatic about it. It was just, it was a way for me to make sure that we could continue providing and doing what we did. And I got to tell you, she just graduated from college and couldn't be happier about it. I knew, and I slept better knowing I had that protection there. But also now I go from looking in that rearview mirror to looking forward, right? It's my future now. It's not about, she gets to take her steps as an adult, but even more importantly, my long-term care insurance policy that covers myself and my spouse, I'm still protecting her, right? Because no matter what we do, if you have the wherewithal to be able to gift something like this, what a valuable thing. And I comes back down to, even when, you know, it's the small gifts. So a parent plans funeral arrangements, you know, or helps pick out songs, or, you know, things like that. Those are truly, they're very much gifts with a very purpose, because when you get into this crisis situation, and that's why there's such a dreaded conversation around extended care planning, because people don't want to think about being at that point in your life. But it's the
Right.
folks that are realists. They understand the potential is there. They understand that there's going to be a huge gap in income to pay for that care when the care is needed. And how do you pay for that? It's just planning.
Right.
And if we're even seeing, just like you said, you may be out in Seattle with big tech, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of 40s and 50-year-old kids. I did the same thing you did. I brought it down to age 45 and ran a lifetime pay, and then ran a 10 pay, because really a 10 pay would be key here, right? You want to put an end in sight, because if you have 45-year-old children, the parents are in their mid 60s, you know, 65 to 70-ish, in that range. So
Right.
they're going to want to see an end in sight, so that they know that the legacy's been paid for, and it's there for them when they need it. And even more fascinating, you touched upon this. What about those kids that are doing well? You know, the parents
Right.
got them to that point, the kids are doing well. I don't like to necessarily think it's a greedy proposition that kids would buy long-term care insurance on their parents because they're protecting their legacy and they want to make, I don't know that it's
Sure.
really that. If we're seeing folks that are in their 40s and 50s and they're watching their parents figure out the dynamics of their grandparents and how to provide that care and where does grandma need to go, and grandpa needs somebody in home, grandma did everything for him, or whatever the case is. A lot of times those kids step back and it's hard to envision your parents at that point in their life where they need care. But I promise you, as you watch, as that 40-year-old takes that giant leap into adulthood, and you start the grind of life, but you're earning a good wage, you're able to save, and you realize that you have the wherewithal, that, you know what, this would just be smart for me to do because it's going to take that burden off of me while I'm still in the process of raising my children, putting them through high school, college, paying off the mortgage, funding my retirement, doing all those things. I can't help but even think at the concierge level that these insurance companies provide, even if that kid buys a policy on their parents to protect and know that, hey, I've got someone there that's going to help me because I am never going to be able to navigate these waters. I don't understand how it goes. I mean, just what a wonderful strategy for that. And you're right. So I ran two 65-year-olds as if the kids are going to pay for this for their parents. And
Hmm.
even a 10 pay doing the same thing, right? 3-year shared care. And of
Hmm.
course, I'm balancing in the Midwest cost of care here. But I mean, we're
Yep.
still 10 pay on two 65-year-olds is $17,000. You're still
Right.
under that gifting at 15,000 per person. So we're still within that threshold. And what an amazing opportunity. And I just think there's something to be said for this, being able to have a gift with a purpose, right? So that the burden doesn't fall there and you've got something that does provide that. Because honestly, it that's the situation that we have in long-term care and extended care planning today, right? So many people just, they're not looking to put that plan in place. And all of a sudden, when something happens, there's usually a health situation. And we have to stop and remember, right? It's your health that buys this coverage, not your checkbook. If you can't health qualify
Right.
for a policy, you're not going to get it. So we've got to put this
Yep.
planning in place much earlier, no different than any other insurance product. I mean, disability, life
Exactly.
insurance, the even long-term care annuities, they even have underwriting involved in them. So nobody's going to take a walking claim. So
No.
I just think this is a really cool opportunity for people to realize that, hey, there are things written in the tax code that would allow you to be able to reduce your taxable income, give a gift with a tremendous purpose for either your child or for the child to give that gift to their parent. I know that was, my mom has been uninsurable since she was 50. So since I was very young, and she would ask me all the time, Angie, is there anything I could qualify for? Because her biggest fear was that she was going to be a burden. And she knew that burden would fall back to me. And she knew what I did for a living. She never understood what I did for a living,
Right.
but she understood, that I traveled a lot, and we were raising our daughter and stuff. So she never ever wanted to be that burden. And so it weighed on her mind heavily. And we were very fortunate that that did not play out for her. Um, but it's
Right.
interesting to me how powerful that can be.
Right. And I think when we take a step back and we think about this gifting play, it doesn't necessarily even have to be all or one. Maybe there's a maximum amount that a parent may be able to gift. Maybe it's not $15,000. Maybe it's
Yeah.
$10,000 or whatever, and making it real easy for the kids to afford long-term care insurance,
Hmm.
where they may have a supplement. But yeah, when we talk about we talk about gifting with a purpose, it really takes us to this stage of what I call multi-generational planning, or has a plan with multi-generational implications. And it's so interesting when we hear, people say, well, the first generation made the money, the second generation spent the money, and the third generation has nothing, right? Well, this goes a long way to thwarting that reality. And so, yeah, it's just another creative avenue in which you can leverage, the tax-free leverage. Think about what, we just talked about. I showed you a 10 pay, $14,178 buys you tax-free day one, $492,750. And that has inflation protection in it. That's where I think savvy people or savvy advisors are recognizing that there's no other way that somebody could create more powerful tax advantage leverage than doing this. So if you think about it, there's a double tax benefit here. The fact is, I'm able to gift the money, not incur a tax on that. And it's funding a vehicle that upon distribution, meaning going on claim, is also not taxable. So those are, I think, some real important buzzwords that I really believe planners can get a lot of mileage out of. And I know darn well their clients they're not even aware of it,
You're right. And, we talk about how life insurance is such a great estate planning tool, right? It's a way for you to mitigate the taxation and things of that nature. But we're missing it, aren't we, here in long-term care? We're missing it in the fact that you can take advantage of a tax code. You can take advantage of less taxes on your reportable income, and you're giving a tax-free benefit to the, whoever you're
Right.
buying the coverage on. And that's huge. I mean, where else are you going to get out the gate almost $500,000 worth of tax-free benefits?
Right.
I think that,
Yep. So
plays very, very strong. And you're right. I got to thinking about it a lot, and we have agents that come into our office periodically and do some training and things. And, it's really, a lot of times they're curious as to, well, Angie, how did you get into long-term care insurance and things of that nature? It's certainly not because I was brought up in it. It's certainly not because my parents owned it. It's certainly not because I went to college to talk about it and learn about it. It's just one of those things that, I don't know. I think everybody just kind of finds their passion when you're in that insurance field. But I stop and I think about, what kind of planning did my parents do? Did we ever have discussions about life insurance, long-term care planning, disability income planning? For me, the answer was no. No, we did not
right.
have those conversations. So I kind of think about, I love how you talked about the first generation made the money, the second generation spent the money, the third generation has none of it. I kind of think about breaking the cycle in education, right? So my
Yeah.
parents didn't have any of that. My grandparents certainly didn't have any of that, let alone even life insurance, right? Well, my
Right.
parents at least had life insurance, but really no long-term care insurance. Kind of just wasn't a thing. We didn't talk about it. So then I get into the insurance space, and one of the first things I purchased when I grabbed my first insurance license, because I was young and in my 20s, was disability income. Then I rewrote my own
Yep.
life insurance. Then I bought long-term care insurance. And now that my daughter's graduated and she's got her first big girl job and she's out in the real world making a living for herself, the first thing I said to her is disability income. It's something
Right.
that you need to plan for, because life happens. Things just happen. It's the same thing. So I think a lot of it also is just generational education as well. And so I think it's important that we have a lot of times when you have these conversations with the consumers, especially around extended care planning or even gifting strategies for this, nothing they've ever heard about. Nobody's really having that conversation.
Right.
But what a great way to plant that seed. And if you're talking to those young, I don't want to call them young executives, but the younger individuals that are, obviously doing more than making ends meet. They've got some discretionary income and things of that nature. What a great way to bring them up into good planning, because really financial planning starts at a very young age, right? It starts when
Yep.
you start earning your first paycheck. You really need to understand all the different insurance needs as you age through life. And long-term care insurance is one of those that you have to have the conversation early before it's too late. And so kind of it all goes back to the whole, hey, let's just bring up the conversation. And I
Yep.
love this is a wonderful way of having that conversation with younger individuals.
I would agree. And I'll close off my discussion on, how did we really find out about this idea? And it's obviously been a possibility for many years, but this whole idea pretty much hit me right between the eyes when I was working on an advisor with his client. And his client's concern when they were putting together all the estate plans is that his kids were spendthrifts. He had 3 of them. And he said, I keep gifting them the money. I know exactly where it goes. It goes out there, it goes into one hand and out the other, and it's gone. And I'm concerned that, once the kids inherit my wealth, they'll blow through it. And then what do? So that's how we came up with this idea, is that he wanted to give them a gift without giving them money per se, because he knew it was in their best interest. So yeah, there are a lot of wide-reaching implications to a strategy like this, but certainly, for your advisors and brokers that have clients with wealth, doesn't matter where the wealth came from. It's a pretty attractive strategy, and they'll certainly come off looking pretty, how should I put it, pretty sophisticated in the eyes of their clients with these ideas.
I love it. I love this conversation. I love, talking about gifting strategies and gifting with a purpose, and to do it 2 different levels of generations, right? Kids to parents, parents to kids. It works out well. So Larry, thank you so much for hopping on this month's podcast with me. I look forward to having you on some more of them, and everybody stay tuned, right? It's the last Tuesday of every month. We'll have our podcast with a different topic. And again, thank you, and everybody have a great day.
All right. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.